Hi, my name is Asavri Navate, and I'm a product manager on the Microsoft Intune team.
Hi, my name is Laura Ritza, and I'm a product manager on the Microsoft Intune team.
Thanks for joining us today on our session for Zero and Non-Zero Trust with Unified Endpoint Management from Microsoft. Here's a quick run through of what we'll be covering today. We'll start with how Microsoft Intune and our partner teams are thinking about how we all fit into the organizational separations of roles and responsibilities of IT and security. Then we'll dig into the top ways that Microsoft Intune integrates with Microsoft Defender. Now over to Laura to get started.
Thanks, Asavri. First, we'll talk about our goals when it comes to unifying endpoint management and breaking down those traditional barriers between IT and security. With Microsoft's unified endpoint management strategy, we're really creating a strong foundation to break down the silos of management and security. We're providing a single pane of glass for enterprises to have visibility across all of their devices, regardless of how they're enrolled or managed, to provide a consistent experience when it comes to managing and securing your endpoints. This comes in the form of integrated tooling where you can get management controls, view insights, and have the ability to configure consistent device compliance and security configurations, all within a single cloud-enabled platform. The goal of this really allows you to optimize for a zero trust security model. With Microsoft's integrated tools, we are looking to drive better security by increasing collaboration between IT and security teams. We achieve this through deep integrations across endpoint security and endpoint management experiences using Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Defender for Endpoint. The goal is to have increased visibility and better communication tools across teams to lower costs of troubleshooting, triaging individual devices, and trying to determine what the configuration on the endpoint is. This reduces friction and makes it easier to have a common approach to secure endpoints by meeting them at the service. Let's dive a bit deeper into some of the top ways that Endpoint Manager and Defender for Endpoint integrate, starting with our unified security management story. There are two main ways to use Endpoint Manager as the place to deploy configurations to your devices across platforms. The first is to leverage our configuration experiences and deploy cloud-first policies to cloud-enabled devices. The same policies can then also support devices that still have on-premise components using our tenant attach functionality. The second way is to use the Endpoint Security Blade for security configuration and management. In the beginning of 2022, we GA'd a feature called Security Management for Defender for Endpoint. This allows devices to receive security configurations without requiring a full Endpoint Manager device enrollment. Instead, you can deploy the same security policies like firewall and antivirus across your environment and have the clients seamlessly enrolled into Intune so that you can continue having a consistent management experience, regardless of how that device reports into the service to receive the policy. This builds upon our single pane of glass story to extend coverage to devices that aren't managed by an Intune service so that they can receive security configurations for Defender from the same place that you would deploy. We have the support across platforms with plans to add Linux and Mac devices to that coverage as well. When using security management for Defender, first, the devices must be onboarded to the Defender service. A trust is established between each device and Azure Active Directory. When the device has an existing trust, that is what is used. When devices haven't registered, a new trust is created. Devices using their Azure Active Directory identity to communicate with Intune. This identity enables Intune to distribute those policies that are targeted to the devices when they check in. Defender for Endpoint reports the status of the policy back to Endpoint Manager. We're continuing to build upon the level of support for security configurations that support this. Attack surface reduction and tamper protection are next to be added to that list, and we'll continue to add more of the security stack. And now over to Asaveri.
Thanks, Laura. Next, I'm going to talk about threat and vulnerability management and Intune security tasks. When you integrate Intune with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, you can take advantage of Defender for Endpoint's threat and vulnerability management and use Intune to remediate endpoint weaknesses identified by Defender's TVM capability. This integration brings a risk-based approach to the discovery and prioritization of vulnerabilities that can improve remediation response time across your environment. This does require setting up a connector to the Defender with Intune, in addition to onboarding Windows devices onto Microsoft Defender for Endpoint so that they may be scanned and show up in the Defender security inventory. In security recommendations in the Microsoft Defender Security Center, software-based threats are identified alongside any recommendations available for those threats. In the Defender console, these threats are summarized and the security admin is alerted. Some remediations are application-based in the form of an update or a block to a particular app, and some may be configuration-based and require configuring a specific setting in an Intune endpoint security policy. The admins then use a few clicks to create a security task, which flags the vulnerable device for remediation. The security tasks are immediately passed to the Intune Admin Center, where the Intune admin can view them. The security task identifies the type of vulnerability, the priority, the status, and the steps that are needed to remediate this vulnerability. The security admin would fill out this form, and when creating the security task, including what you are requesting the remediation for, applicable device groups, priority, due date, and any other optional notes. If you choose the attention required remediation request option, selecting a due date will not be available since there's no specific action that's needed to be taken. In the Intune portal, admins can now see that there's a new task created under Security Task Node and Endpoint Security. This is a logical place given that endpoint security policies are specifically used to help admins manage device security. The Intune admin chooses to complete or reject this task. When a task is accepted, the Intune admin then acts to remediate the vulnerability through Intune using the guidance provided as part of the security task. After the remediation is successful, the risk exposure score in Defender can now drop based on this new information from scanning the remediated devices. Moving over to a different scenario where Defender can determine the risk score for your device to influence the Intune compliance state. As Microsoft Defender for Endpoint continues to add more capabilities to their solution, more types of threats can be detected and inform your device's risk score. Intune can integrate data from Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which feeds into Intune's device compliance policies, or for Intune's app protection policies. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint will use its extensive threat detection capabilities to define a risk score for a particular device. Here's how it works. For device compliance policies, for example, suppose the user of a device with MDE installed has navigated to a suspected phishing website. The risk score would get elevated for this device. This data gets sent to Intune via the Intune Partner Service, and if the Intune compliance policy requirement does not allow devices with such a risk, the device gets marked non-compliant in Intune. For those familiar with conditional access, you may know that there is a capability to require a compliant device to access protected resources. Thus, if the tenant has conditional access turned on, then this non-compliant device would get its access blocked to cloud-based corporate resources such as Exchange and SharePoint until the threat is remediated and the risk score has dropped. A similar model is followed for Intune app protection policies when a risk score is received from Defender on a targeted device. This is more commonly used where compliance policies are not supported, for example, for unenrolled devices. The event and threat details are exposed in the Security Center, and the Intune compliance details or app protection policy details are exposed in the MEM console and the relevant reporting for those policies. Today, this feature is available on Android and iOS on both enrolled and unenrolled devices. The feature is also available on Windows devices through device compliance. The prerequisites include a subscription to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and to Microsoft Intune. You must connect your Intune tenant via the connector functionality to the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And then for devices to send risk signals to Intune, they must be onboarded successfully onto Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which may require deploying the MDE app to devices as required or onboarding via an EDR profile, depending on the platform in question.
Let's take a quick look at some of the experiences that are available using the Endpoint Security Blade in Intune. Using Endpoint Security, enterprises can deploy and manage configurations across the categories that are reflected, like antivirus, distant encryption, or firewall. We are constantly adding more support for new settings, capabilities, and first-class experiences so that you can secure your endpoints all in a single place. One example of this is that we are adding new capabilities for firewall and device control policies, which allow enterprises to define a reusable group that contains a set of properties that can be referenced as part of the supported setting that resides in the policy. Reusable groups helps to relieve some overhead from managing the same properties that can be reused across multiple policies and dynamically updated so that changes only have to happen in one place. In the case of firewall rules, a reusable setting group can be defined to contain a set of fully qualified domain names as well as a list of remote IP address ranges. After creating the reusable setting group, the option to use that setting group is available in the firewall rule policy. In the case of device control, a reusable setting group can be defined to contain a set of removable media like USB devices, which can then be used to manage access control for defining permissions to block or allow different levels of access to that removable media. Again, experiences like these continue to build upon the breadth of support that is available with our unified endpoint management stack. Thanks for listening about some of the ways that Defender and Intune come together to embody unified endpoint management so that you can optimize your zero trust security model. Make sure to keep up with all of the latest announcements and continue to send us feedback. Thank you.